Now that we have 5 weeks of data at our disposal, I feel like I definitely know all there is to know about all of these quarterbacks. So we will be reviewing what they've done to this point, and in another video soon to be uploaded, I will be projecting what their teams will do down the stretch. I kind of feel like this season's a bit of a formality at this point. We've already played 5 weeks. I kind of know exactly how it's going to go, but I won't spoil it in this video. I'll just spoil it in the next one. So, with that said, we get started off with a very easy one here in Josh Allen. He sucks. He's going in the ultimate nullifier. Just kidding. He's amazing. He is incredibly good at dang near every part of being a quarterback. He is so incredible as a runner that you can design a good chunk of your offense with him in designed run game, be it read option, draws, things of that nature. Can do quarterback power since he is such a good athlete. But beyond that, he has a bit of a bad reputation with his interceptions, which is a sign that people just don't know the best numbers or they don't have access to them, unfortunately, because interceptions don't really tell you much of anything, to be honest. They are very luck driven in small sample sizes, such as even an entire season. So he's been unlucky with that. He doesn't really turn the ball over, and that's shown by his turnover worthy play percentage from PFF. It's very, very low at 1.5%. The lowest is 1.3%. So he is keeping great care of the ball, and he's not really getting a ton of splash plays and like deep downfield passes, but he's just taking everything the defense allows him, and he's creating a lot that isn't conventionally there. He is great with the play extension. He is great with just taking the easy stuff, which is such a big part of being quarterback at a high level, is just being efficient with what is there because it's only going to be there briefly. So you might as well, get a 6 yard gain, a 4 yard gain, whatever, if it's not coming at the expense of obviously, a real chance of getting like a 30-yard play. But with his receivers, they're not really uplifting him too much. They do help a bit with run after the catch, so that is one thing that he benefits from, but they don't give him amazing separation. They're not great contested catch guys. Basically, all we see from Buffalo's success is Allen, to put it bluntly. So, very easy. He can uplift any team basically to being a contender. The next one, though, is a very big change of pace in lots of ways with Tua, who is basically just the polar opposite of Josh Allen. Allen has all of the physical tools, Tua really doesn't. Allen can sometimes be a little bit, you know, inconsistent with fundamental stuff. That's really calmed down over the years. But, sometimes he does try to do a little much. Tua is pretty much just going to do what the play is designed for. So, very different players. It's unfair, honestly, that Tua's right after him. They are in the same division, though. That's, what this is. So, Tua is going to go in the sum of the team's parts because he does do some very nice things. He will get rid of the ball super quickly, which helps a lot. He does get a lot of plays completed for, you know, positive yardage that aren't expected to, as evident by him having a very healthy completion percentage over expected at 4.5%. That is very good. It could be in part because Tyreek, who, is no longer playing this season, and Waddle were very good, so they could uplift that a little bit with making some catches that maybe weren't expected. But in general, it is a large part of Tua to get some stuff that maybe wasn't there for other quarterbacks because he is getting rid of the ball so quickly and he's doing it, before the receivers really created separation in lots of instances. So that is a great thing he does. He will do a fair amount of splash plays, honestly, but it's just not as consistent as what would be needed to negate the fact that he's very susceptible to turnover worthy plays, both interception wise, 4.3% turnover worthy play percentage. That's very high, about triple what Allen was. And he fumbles the ball a lot as well. Part of that is he hasn't had a good line basically once in his career. So that does play a part, but he also does just let go of that thing a little bit more than you would like to see. So very turnover worthy, susceptible, very healthy, big time throw rate from PFF at 5.5%. That's very good, but it's not necessarily conducive to the big time success you would like to see because there will be lots of times where he kind of deflates that number with just taking, lots of checkdowns, say, in place of, maybe getting like an 8-yard reception. He'll get like 2 yards in some instances. Justin Fields is very funny to follow up Tua because he's kind of more in line with the Josh Allen type of things, not really with skill set. I actually have him coming in just under Tua. I had them with the same exact grade, but I would rather have Tua. I think he has worse support, so I'm giving him the edge there in the tie breaker department. Fields, same old, same old. You know, he will wow you with some really nice stuff, but he is going to turn the ball over a lot. He's not really a decisive passer in any way. He isn't really creating much of anything on a consistent basis. It's just kind of few and far between really nice plays. And, you know, as a whole, he's just not what you want to see in a starting caliber quarterback, to put it bluntly. Too much turnovers for not enough consistency in big plays. Really poor yardage. He's at 236 combined yards rushing and passing. There will be a bit of a deflation from being a running quarterback because, you know, you're going to rack up more passing yards than you will through the ground, and it's going to speed up the game to run. But 236 is really bad. It's in the bottom 20 percentile for combined yards for starting quarterbacks. And he's not really efficient either. He's in the bottom 20th percentile in expected points added, quarterback rating, big time throw rate, and turnover worthy plays as well to round it out, I guess, while we're airing all of his dirty laundry. All of that is to say, there was a lot of negative things on him, but again, he will do some nice stuff in, some situations. He will extend plays and find some things, but generally speaking, he's just not getting enough out of his progressions when he doesn't see it immediately, basically, or doesn't, just follow the number one the entire way through. A big change of pace from that, though, is Drake May, who is going to be one of the bigger surprises, I think, in the rankings. To give you a little bit of a precursor, he is really playing at a high level right now. And I'm talking like top 10 type of quarterback level. That isn't to say that he's necessarily going to complete, that level for the rest of the season. But right now, to this point, he's been very good in lots of different ways. His completion percentage over expected is at 9.5%. That is, I believe, the second highest in the entire league, with it's the third highest, rather. The first is at 12%, so him at 9.5%, really good stuff. And that really does tell you a lot about me because, not to spoil too much about the team breakdown, but May does not have a lot of support. So everything he's doing, for the most part, is on his own merit. And that's reflected too. He has a very good PFF grade. It's in the top 20 percentile. He, again, has that amazing completion percentage over expected, which does suggest, he is making tough plays. He's very good with combined yards at 275. He doesn't really have a lot of turnover worthy plays. He doesn't have a ton of big time plays to this point in the PFF grading sense, at least. But for the most part, his good plays are big time plays in reality because, again, he's not really getting a lot of separation from receivers. The line, not really giving him a lot of time. So, all of this is to say, he gets a great offense out of not a lot of support, and he's going into the Super Bowl potential on right team. That is, again, a reflection of what he's done to this point. Who's to say if he continues? I was very high on him as a prospect, but the numbers do love him. And from what I've seen, he's looked really good as well. It's not just like he's, somehow accumulating numbers. Someone who is also not somehow accumulating numbers, but is also just bad, is Aaron Rodgers, who, get this, Aaron Rodgers, the guy that wasn't good his last year in Green Bay, had that thumb issue, yes, wasn't good with the Jets, coming off the Achilles tear, is, like 60 years old. He's somehow not playing well. All of a sudden, you would have thought that, being old and injured would be great to turn things around for your career. That's often how you do it. The older you get and the more injured you get, the better you play. That's always how it happens. In all seriousness, though, Rodgers is really bad. He is so immobile. It is comical at times where it seems like a big feat if he gets like a 2-yard rush, more so honestly than like Brady or even like Peyton Manning at the end of their careers, I feel. Rodgers really neutered by that because he was doing a lot of his work through play extension. PFF gives him the lowest grade out of any of the quarterbacks here. So I think that does say a lot. And really, there aren't too many numbers that are even like okay for him. The the funny thing is he is getting a lot of his expected points added through run after catch. He's first in EPA from run after catch, so that's inflated, but he's still at just an okay, like 50th percentile type of area for expected points added. That's not enough for me. That's basically the only thing he has going for him is that he has a decent offense going. But when you look at things that are specific to him, it's really bad. Again, that PFF being the worst in the league. I'm not fully going to say he's an ultimate nullifier, but I do think he is a backup caliber quarterback these days. I was really high on him for a ton of my football watching days. I was enamored with him with his incredible play extension abilities, but at this point, it's just donezo. And I do think he could have some merit as a backup, but unfortunately for him, he's starting. So we got to grade him on that. Next, we have a guy that is just a conventional backup. No need to really beat around the bush. Ultimate nullifier. You cannot really evaluate what the team is doing around him because he is so bad right now. He hasn't been tragically bad other years. And, with Burrow unfortunately being hurt consistently through the years, he has gotten some runway. But this year has been so bad for Browning. Yes, he doesn't have a line to support him, but he does have about as good of a duo of receivers as you'll see in the league. So, him having the highest turnover worthy play percentage in the league at 6%, 6% of his plays are turnover worthy. That is so high. When we look at like the lowest, obviously the highest to lowest is going to have a bit of a contrast, but the lowest isn't like far and away the lowest. There's lots of people hovering around that area. It is at 1%, 1.3% to be exact. So 6% for turnover worthy plays is insanely high, and there's nothing really to support him. He does make some splash plays. Of course, you would hope so with all of those turnover worthy plays, but just, universally bad across the board pretty much in stats, and turning the ball over just insanely tons. That wasn't a good way of wording that, but you know what I mean. He's just not doing well. Somebody else that's not doing well, but in the relative sense, is Lamar Jackson. Lamar still a very good quarterback. Lots of teams would want what he's given to this point, aside from that Chiefs game where it was just so ugly, hard to watch, honestly. And I'm a Lamar guy. One of the few players I like for just being a player. Lots of guys I like because of off the field reasons. Lamar is just a guy I've liked because I loved him as a prospect. I was just getting really into football at that time, and I was big on him. I didn't really understand why people were so, you know, problematic with him at quarterback, wanting him to do receivers things. So I've been big on Lamar, but I can't put him at the highest of levels right now because he just simply hasn't earned that this season. Still some amazing stuff. Very good QBR, has a great expected points added per drop back, completion percentage, over expected. Those are all in the top 20 percentile. So, really good stuff there. Not getting a lot of help with play action either. Very, low end amounts of that, which is just kind of a universal easy button for quarterbacks where, you know, he's doing it without the linebackers being sucked in to defend the run. So that is a good thing for him. But PFF has him as a bottom 20 percentile quarterback. And, if you are putting some stock into what the full picture has been, I think that's kind of fair because, again, that Chiefs game was so hard to watch. First drive, amazing. Pretty much everything after that was him looking just confused, not in sync, whatever you want to say. Lots of turnover worthy plays. All of that is to say, very, confusing going in the Super Bowl on right team. I have him ahead of May just because Jackson is doing some really spectacular stuff still that I think May isn't quite matching, but it's honestly really close for me so far. I think May has been outstanding. I think Lamar has been disappointing again relative to his expectations. Somebody that's probably been at their expectations but just had bad expectations, Joe Flacco. Another pretty easy one, ultimate nullifier. Pretty funny. We got two Bengals now after the trade back to back. And the extra funny thing is that Flacco is the one they traded for. And I think he's actually been a little bit worse than Browning, which is really sad because Browning has been really bad, as I mentioned. But Flacco has been, in my estimation, through evaluating the numbers and culminating them together through various weightings, I think Flacco has been a little bit worse in a notable enough way. He has the worst offense in expected points added per drop back. That is looking at every situation you have and comparing it to every situation of that in the past. So like 1st and 10, you're expected to get, say, maybe two points, depending on where you're on the field. And with that said, Flacco is averaging negative zero point 0.3 expected points added to drop back, meaning the other team is projected to score quicker than he is because of what he's doing. So that negative zero point 0.3 is really bad. He's costing his team zero point 0.3 points a drop back, which, may not sound like the highest thing, but it's super bad. Browning is nearby at 0.24. We have another guy at 0.21 who'll be coming up soon. Lots of quarterbacks, though. These are the guys that are getting majority of the play, obviously. They're at, around zero. Lots of guys that are good, they're at like point 0.3. They're kind of at like the entire inverse of where Flacco is. So he is so bad. He has kind of turned down, I think, a little bit of the turnover worthy stuff. He's playing a bit more within structure than he was, maybe the past couple of years, but that really isn't too much of a benefit because it's just, you know, him playing more wishy-washy, I guess, is how I would put it. He's really not accumulating yards, 207 yards in total a game. That's so bad. It's bottom 20 percentile. It's just, you know, it's really rough all around. Kevin Stefanski is thought to be a good mind to this day, I think, by a lot of people. So I don't think it's, totally like a coaching issue with Flacco. He doesn't have a great support around him, I understand, but just basically every single number I can see, he's in the bottom 20 percentile. And again, worst expected points added in the league by a pretty notable amount. Next, we have another sort of unfortunate case in CJ Stroud, nowhere near the floundering of some of these last guys I've mentioned, but just not really approaching what he was year one. I would say he's better than he was last year, but I don't think he's where we want to see him at. So CJ Stroud is very tough in that sense. There are some things that work for him. He does get no help really through play action. He's in the bottom 20 percentile, I believe it is, in play action percentage run, which again, I don't weight that super highly, but I do factor it in quite a bit because it is indicative of one, the support you're getting through running, and two, how much your offensive coordinator makes things easy for you because basically every quarterback's going to benefit from play action. It's just going to suck in the linebackers a little bit, make it easier to throw over their heads. So that is to say, he has some stuff working against him. That line is atrocious. So he's going to be, I think, a little bit overwhelmed in that regard, but just not at a super high level right now. Definitely a respectable level, no doubt about it. I would say he's at pretty high end of the sum equals his team's part, if it'll let me place him there, because he does again have a lot of issues with the team, but he does have some receiving options. Nico Collins is about as good as it gets as a receiver, so he has that going for him. I think if he had a better team, he would be playing at an above average level because he's playing at a good level right now with not a lot of help. So it is hard to project. It's always, difficult when there's asymmetrical things in quarterbacks with support. And it's really asymmetrical that Stroud has, this line that he has where few can relate to that level. Somebody who is overachieving, though, finally some positivity, is Daniel Jones. He is really tearing it up. He is number one in quarterback rating. He's great with PFF grade, has an 81 grade, amazing expected points added per dropback at 0.32. As I mentioned, that's like the gold standard right now for great quarterbacks. Josh Allen's at 0.33. Trying to see who number one is. I believe it's 0.34. So really good stuff. 0.35 rather from Jones. He's right there, for the top in what he's doing compared to what is expected. He is getting a lot of help through play action. That is basically the only knock I could come up with him. He also is pretty low on, big time plays, 2.4% according to PFF. I think that sounds pretty believable from what I've seen. He doesn't really, make a lot of amazing plays. A lot of it is within structure what he's doing, but at the end of the day, he's executing within the structure. So I think you'll take that. He's also balancing it out with not really turning over the ball, or at least not really having plays that should be turnovers. So this is definitely the wonkiest one to this point. He's honestly, I feel so weird doing this, but Super Bowl potential on average team, that is again this point in the season. The Colts, I would say, have a good team, not average, but I wouldn't say it's much more than good. Like I definitely would push back if you said it's any more than good. So that's kind of, where we're at. It would have to be, some things fall his way, but if he continues playing at this level, he is going to really be in the mix. He's not quite up to Josh Allen's, baseline level, but at the end of the day, Jones is playing at a super high level. That is one thing I will say. Just players on the left are better than players on the right. So Daniel Jones, amazing stuff to this point. We won't be able, unfortunately, to say the same thing about his division mate, Trevor Lawrence, who I think is probably unreasonably getting the benefit of the doubt from people here, because with the Jags being 4-1, I think a lot of people are just thinking, well, Liam Cohen has figured out, Trevor Lawrence got that amazing potential coming through. It's unfortunately not really that case, to be honest. Lawrence has been pretty rough in lots of ways. He has the lowest big time throw percentage at 0.5%. That is so tiny. Again, we're talking high end is 6% or so, so he's about a tenth of that. It's, not the most damning of things, because at the end of the day, he will, you know, play within structure at times and have success that way. And also, it is just a finicky stat. It's not the most objective thing to determine what constitutes a big time play, even though PFF does have some real, sort of feedback provided on it. All of that is to say, Lawrence is not doing enough to negate being, again, erratic with accuracy like he's been for some time now. Average quarterback rating at 50, not a good PFF grade at 67. He's completing less passes than is expected of him by about 5%, which is super bad. That's about as bad as it's going to get. Again, that big time throw is the least in the league. He's also turning or doing turnover worthy plays at a high percentage in the bottom 20 percentile. He can definitely outperform this, but right now he is tweener between Ultimate Nullifier and I like you as a backup, which is not a good place to be, obviously, especially for a number one overall pick. I'm putting him at Nullifier because that's where his grade ended up being for me, but just overall, not doing well. It is smoke and mirrors right now in Jacksonville, maybe hence their trade with Tyson Campbell, getting them a little bit of a, moving up in the draft. Maybe they think Newsom can be better than what Campbell is, but I think that kind of signals that they're not really too serious about this season, which is probably the right thing, even if I don't like that trade necessarily. But Lawrence has been really rough. Don't let the record fool you. And speaking of number one overall pick quarterbacks that aren't playing well this year, we have Cam Ward, who, honestly, no offense to Lawrence by that, he's not playing anywhere near as bad as Ward is. I know I just went in pretty hard on Lawrence there, but Cam Ward is so bad this year. I'm not just saying that's, going to be true for the rest of his career or anything, but right now it's a pretty easy decision to put him as the worst in Ultimate Nullifier, the worst here. He is at the bottom of basically every stat I looked at. Quarterback rating, completion percentage over expected, yards in total, rushing mixed with passing. He is getting the least amount of help from run after catch. So there is that, I guess, is like a little bit of a redeeming grace. bottom 20th percentile in PFF and expected points added per dropback. Lots of bad numbers. The one thing that is pretty interesting, at least, is that he's not turning the ball over. At least he shouldn't be. Very low turnover worthy percentage, as he's in the top 20 percentile for that. So he is really good at not getting into bad situations there. He is making some big time throws as well. He has a respectable 60th percentile big time throw percentage. That is to say, there's some stuff to look forward to with him. He's also not getting any help through play action. So maybe, things can look better in a soon sort of perspective, especially when they get rid of Brian Callahan, which is going to happen at least a year too late. It's sad that they wasted, a rookie year with Ward with such an abysmal coach, but Ward's also not really helping his cause for what it's worth. Someone that is helping his cause a bit, though, not maybe as much as advertised, is Patrick Mahomes, who is, I think, honestly, consistently the most overrated quarterback, most overrated player actually in the league, arguably. Some, you know, other players come into the mix, but I think it's usually Mahomes. That isn't to say that he's bad. It's just he's not at the level people make him out to be. Basically, none of the numbers suggest that. You basically just have to look at wins, which, great. That is what we're after. But at the end of the day, you're not the sole reason for those. So if that's all you're referencing, which is usually what it is coming down to with Mahomes as of late, it's not, you know, enough of a thing. He does have an elite QBR. He's in the top 20 percentile there, top 20 percentile for combined yards. After that, it's really solid stuff and kind of whatever things. He has a 73 PFF grade. Top guys are around 90. That's, not great. He has a good expected points added per dropback at 19. That's in the top 80th percentile. So, good there. Gets lots of play action help, is completing the exact percentage of passes that would be expected of him. Gets a lot of benefit from run after the catch, which, he can play a part in. He can, put it in advantageous areas, but it's also getting schemed up by Andy Reid, who is just, basically universally regarded as an amazing offensive mind, one of the best of all time. So, that definitely plays a part as well, even with the receivers not being really NFL caliber for the most part. At least, right now with, some of their menaces to society not playing currently. But with that said, you know, it's lots of good things with him, nothing at the absolute highest level, and some stuff that's just, kind of underwhelming to put it bluntly. He's making some big plays, he's not turning it over at a high rate, but all in all, he is going to go behind Lamar, believe it or not, and also behind Drake May, because May, frankly, is, I think, doing similar levels, but with worse help even than Mahomes has, which I know we like to, give him the benefit of the doubt there with saying his team's just not good enough right now. But, May has an even worse team, so that's not really a thing. I know Lamar looks weird being ahead of Patrick with the worst record, and Lamar looks so bad against Mahomes' Chiefs, but at the end of the day, Mahomes wasn't playing defense, and, that's what was giving Lamar the issue, not Mahomes. So next we have Herbert, who is on the cusp of two tiers. So it's going to be, just a little bit of me being harsh with him, I guess. And I do want to preface by saying he has an elite PFF grade at 83. He's not doing turnover worthy plays basically at all. Those are both top 20 percentile type of stuff. So good on him for that. He has a good amount of combined yards at about 280. Not really, much in the total touchdown department, but they are running the ball an obnoxious amount. They don't really care about winning over there. They just want to be physical. So, Herbert is behind the eight ball on that. The offensive line sucks. The receivers haven't been good. Greg Roman is not an NFL caliber offensive coordinator. He's only really had success for like a, you know, 2 year maybe stretch with Kaepernick. Lamar carried him a bit, I guess, but at the end of the day, we can't really give him too much props there since Lamar's been better without him. So, yes, Herbert has a lot going against him, but a lot of these numbers are kind of underwhelming. And by that, I mean sometimes even problematic. Yes, they are, neutering him by trying to establish the run and play old school football. And by that, I mean play poorly. But with that said, his EPA, which is, a measure of efficiency, bottom 20th percentile. He's getting play action, top 20th percentile. Completion percentage over expected, bottom 20th. And, big time throw rate, bottom 20th. Those are really rough. So his good is really good. He has more, kind of meh, but, at least the good is in more impactful things for the most part. So very hard eval. I am going to put him as the best of the sum equals teams parts. Very weird to say with him being, good with a bad team, but he's just not really getting much out of the offense right now, which very hard to do. The offense sucks, to put it bluntly, but he's just not making a whole lot of it better. And somebody that's not making it better, period, is Geno Smith, who is really rough this year, unfortunately. Kind of came out of nowhere that he's this rough, in fact, because it seemed like he was going to a better system with the Raiders, where, yeah, Pete Carroll's going to meddle in things and mess with the offense. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's too old, unfortunately. He plays football like it's maybe like the 70s. He thinks that, the Legion of Boom can return in Las Vegas with none of the talent. But Geno Smith is not helping his cause. QBR, PFF, expected points added per dropback, turnover worthy play, all bottom 20th percentile. That is really rough. Actually, I will amend with Herbert. I said bottom 20th percentile, I believe, for lots of those stats. I meant bottom 40th. That is a pretty notable distinction. So my mistake there. I was incorrect with my wording there. Bottom 40th for Herbert, but Geno is bottom 20th. I'd know that to be true. I won't be amending that. Bottom 40th for him, though, in completion percentage over expected. So he does have that. The only sort of good thing is they're not doing play action, which is funny since they want to establish the run so much. They're not even, reaping any benefit from that in the passing game, really. Low play action percentage, hinders him. He has solid yardage, not amazing, but above average yardage. And he has above average big time throws, but nothing, spectacular to negate the fact that he's really rough in lots of stats. So he's going to be closer to Lawrence than these other jabronis, but he's not, doing himself any favors here. Somebody that's not really supporting their case too well either is Bo Nix, who is just kind of existing, to be honest. I think, people are going to be confused a little bit by the Broncos having some games where they, outperform, I think, what they really should have. 3-2 is not an amazing record by any stretch, but I think, there are some wins in there where you just think, did they really deserve to win that one? The Eagles really, a good point of reference with that one. Nix is below average in a good chunk of his stats from what I've seen, and really rough in PFF grade, which is, I think indicative of what you can see with watching with your own eyes. He's just not really, making much of what's there. Broncos have an amazing offensive line that benefits him. Not amazing receiver play, but good enough. It's just, you know, Nix is kind of, I would say, getting a bit less than you would expect from the offense. So with that, I'm putting him in as honestly behind Rodgers, I guess, just because I think Nix has so much more going for him team wise than Rodgers. Rodgers doesn't have a bad situation, but the fact that we can even have this conversation, Rodgers with that abysmal 50 PFF grade, Nix being pretty, you know, close within striking distance with a 59. There are definitely some things that, go Nix's favor, but it's just overall he's not playing at a high level, and it's really problematic to see since he entered, as an old rookie. I believe he was 24 his rookie year. He was expected to be pro ready. That's not, looking the part. Something that is looking the part, though, is Dak Prescott, who has been amazing this year, which I'm big fan of. Don't like the Cowboys because Jerry Jones is a terrible person and, he doesn't care about winning. He just wants headlines. But I do like Dak Prescott, big mental health advocate, and, seems like a good dude. I think for a little bit, people were, holding on to some allegations with him with the DUI situation that turned out to not be true. So he's gotten some unnecessary hate in the grand scheme of things. And, also just playing for the Cowboys is going to do that to you too, where, their fans are obnoxious, sure, but the haters can also be obnoxious. So Dak playing about as well as he has in his career, tied for first PFF grade. He's in top 20 percentile for yards, for completion percentage over expected, for QBR, really within striking distance for number one in QBR, in fact, 77 versus Daniel Jones, aforementioned 80. So Dak is playing at a great level. He's doing it in a way that's pretty conducive to what he does do in his ideal world, where he will do a lot of things that are, sometimes aggressive to a fault, but also sometimes really pays off. Super high, big time throw percentage. Not a high turnover really play percentage, though. So it is working out in his favor a lot in this instance. And he's doing this without CeeDee Lamb and a not, competent line. So he's doing this on hard mode. He is playing better in my estimation than Josh Allen is right now. You know, you you tend to think Allen is going to be the better pick moving forward, but right now I think Prescott is playing at a very similar level to Allen, which is to say amazing. And I think Allen is playing with far less at his disposal. Somebody who's playing with even then far less than Dak is, though, is his division mate, Jaden Daniels. He is another hard eval. He has played just 3 games, I believe it was, this season. So, not a rich sample size in an already small sample to begin with. And, there are some things you don't love to see. He looks good, I think, for the most part, which is, something that you do place some emphasis on. He's also, you know, not really allotted a lot of benefit from his team because, when everybody's healthy, it's not a good offense. It's an okay one. So Daniels is supplying a lot of the offense himself, but it's just truly been a middling offense to this point with Daniels. They're a slightly above average expected points added offense with Daniels. They are not completing the amount of passes you would expect. They're about 3.5 percentage or percent rather below what is expected with Daniels throws. He is combining for a lot of yards, which you do like to see, and he is making a fair amount of very difficult plays while also not turning the ball over, putting it in harm's way. So, a lot of good things, not really helping too much with the touchdown side, but overall is doing a lot of good things, but is just not really getting amazing results. So, that ends up being a very tough spot for me where I think, he still is the cream of the crop type of level, but I just don't think to this point he's been too much of anything. So I'm putting him actually behind Stroud in the sum equals teams parts where it's just, not too much different than what you would expect based on the support. Again, he doesn't have really any support. This team sucks, but it's not really like the offense is, outperforming that too much. It's maybe a little better than what you'd hope for. So it is a bit harsh to hold it against him that the offense isn't really having much success. He doesn't really get any benefit from run after catch from his receivers. So, that's another thing that is holding him back a bit. But until the offense starts producing at a higher level, I don't really see a world where I can put him in the Super Bowl, type of potential on a right team level. I think he very much is that, but to this point, it hasn't looked that way. Jalen Hurts. This is a fun one in the sense that lots of people don't like him because they think, it's just smoke and mirrors. It's, all his team helping him. To this point, it has been not that at all, where Hurts's support has not been anywhere near where it should be. The offensive line is still helping a good bit, but the receiver play is really rough right now. AJ Brown was like bottom 5 in yards per route run for receivers with 50% or more of the lead receivers' targets. Hurts obviously plays a part in that, but at the end of the day, Brown should be getting, a lot of yards just by being AJ Brown. So even if Hurts is not getting it to him when he can in some instances, Brown's not really, elevating the situation either. So Hurts is doing a lot of this on his own merit. He is really looking good in the games I've seen. He's not really getting play action benefit, which is weird since they are such a ground and pound team with an amazing offensive line. Barkley and the guy they got Tank Bigsby rather is, also there. So it's odd. They should be, theoretically running a lot of play action, but Hurts is doing a good job. He's not putting the ball in harm's way. Very low 20th percentile for turnover worthy play percentage. He is making some big splash plays. That Dallas game, week 1, he might not have had the best numbers. I don't really recall exactly what they looked like, but I just remember that watching and thinking like Hurts is really getting all of this on his own merit. It's, him taking the snap, scanning, not seeing anything, and, scampering for yardage still with, good pocket presence turned into good running. And, that is a sign that, you know, he's doing a lot to elevate the team. I'm putting him behind Mahomes strictly because I have them tied for overall, but I do think Mahomes does have a worse situation. So that's why Hurts goes there, but definitely Super Bowl caliber play from Hurts. He just needs a little bit more help. Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited, has played the most games for the Giants, and he's been bad, which is, I guess not too surprising. He's been at least a fun bad, though, kind of a Jameis Winston type of deal where, basically every pass is going to be completed, be it to his team or the other one. Who's to say? Lots of yards, 293 combined yards is great. Amazing big time throw percentage at 6.5%, but abysmal 5% turnover worthy play. So it really balances out. He's not getting a lot of touchdowns, but he is getting a lot of yards. He doesn't get any run after catch from his receivers. So there is that. The offense is not really functional, to be honest. No play action benefit for him. So, lots of things going on, but I do think just in general, he's not, you know, really doing much of anything. His QBR sucks. It's at 33, which is just really bad. And, from what I've watched, it's fun watching him play, but it's also kind of disgusting at the same time. He's going behind Lawrence, which again, kind of tells you where we're at with things. You may have noticed at this point by now that this individual down here is filling in for Carson Wentz. I couldn't find Carson Wentz in Vikings attire, so I thought the next best thing would just be to put in Prince Harry. They are one and the same after all, so just, that's the reason if things looked odd to you. We got McCorkle over on the right. I put him in as well because he wasn't on the list initially. So next, speaking of McCorkle, we have Mac Jones, but more consistently good and more, you know, good when he's good. In Jared Goff, neither are exciting quarterbacks, to be honest, but Goff is a very functional one. He benefits a ton from lots and lots of play action, but, you know, he's getting the offense to function where it should, potentially even a little bit higher than you would think. So, with that said, he does get a lot of run after catch. St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery, those types of guys, Laporta, they'll do that for you. Even Jameson Williams, who is on my crap list. Jameson Williams destroyed me as a fantasy owner of his. He got me 2 points when I needed him most, so I'm very upset with him. But as a whole, good weapons for Goff. And Goff is playing very well. He's got an amazing completion percentage over expected at 11%. Good receivers, can inflate that again. But at the end of the day, it's going to largely come down to the quarterback play. Goff is playing really well. And with that said, I'm going to put him in as the highest of the Super Bowl potential for quarterbacks so far. I do think he has been very steady. I do think he checks a lot of the boxes you want. He has a little bit higher of a turnover worthy play percentage than you'd like to see, as it's kind of, symmetrical with his big time throw percentage, 3.4 versus 3.1% respectively. But he is doing a mix of things. He's taking, what is there with short stuff. He will push it deep as well. So I don't think he's necessarily, uplifting the team much, but I do think he's getting a very good amount out of them. And somebody, though, that I do think is uplifting the team is Jordan Love, who I don't think is getting talked about probably as much as he should, because I do think his numbers are very good, but maybe not as interesting as some other quarterbacks to this point. But Love is really, really checking a lot of boxes. He has the offense absolutely humming with a 35 expected points added per dropback, leading the league. The next closest is very close with 34, and there's somebody with 33. That's somebody being Josh Allen. So there are people hovering around his number. It's not abnormally high, but at the end of the day, he leads the league in expected points added. So he's getting the most out of every situation he's in. Very good PFF grade, 83. He is checking so many boxes. He's doing the big time, you know, stretch the field, run around, find somebody open type of stuff. He's doing that at a high level. He's not really turning the ball over a whole lot, or at least putting it in harm's way much. He has a lot of help from run after catch, which I think is from LaFleur being a great coach. So he will dial up some stuff. And they do have some shifty receivers at their disposal, even if they're all a bunch of like wide receiver twos for the most part. But man, Love is playing at a great level right now. If he continues to play like this, nobody's going to want to play these Packers. And, you know, that's pretty impressive because there are some, you know, consistently good things on this Packers team. But I think the offensive line is not playing what you would expect so far. The defense is playing well, yes, but Love is the story right now for me. Parsons, obviously, potentially the best player on that team, but Love easily, far and away, no doubt about it, most impactful. And he's playing super well right now. So all of that is to say, Love, as you could imagine, is going in at a very high level and struggling right now to get him. He's not going here. He's actually going in. I am going to put him behind Allen, but it's honestly a bit of a discussion right now. I do feel pretty safe with Allen above Love, but if you said Love right now for Allen, I don't think I would get into too much of an altercation with you. I don't think it would result in fisticuffs. It would probably just result in, me being stern with you. After that last struggle with the placement, I have changed the zoom, so apologies if that's unpleasing to you, but I think that will be ultimately for the better. Hopefully, that'll lead to less struggling. With that said, we now have Prince Harry, Carson Wentz himself, who is at the benefit of Vikings fans seeing JJ McCarthy be just totally abysmal. Wentz looks good in comparison, but don't get it twisted. Wentz is not playing well. He is just, a bus rider, to take a page out of Charles Barkley's book and, just say he's kind of there for the ride. He's not really doing too much anything to, you know, contribute to the team, to put it bluntly. But the Vikings do have a good enough team to where that kind of works. Wentz is, below average in more stats than he's average or above average in. And, doing that with a lot of help is, not great. He is getting a lot of yards, so I do like that. He is not really getting a lot of splashy plays despite putting the ball in harm's way a respectable amount of the time. So, just kind of an odd case. He is, I think, what we think of nowadays with, kind of an erratic type of Ryan Fitzpatrick kind of backup quarterback where it's not the most conventional, game manager type, but backup nonetheless. So I like you as a backup. Definitely better than Rodgers. He's just a better version of him. So pretty easy for the ranking there. Somebody that is a bit more confusing, though, is Caleb Williams, who does have a good structure in place for him in a sense that Ben Johnson does have a lot of success as an offensive coordinator, but is a first time head coach. So, there is a bit of wonkiness with that, getting a new coach at such a young age. is always a bit difficult. The receivers, lots of resources in there, so you would think they have it pretty well mapped out, but not necessarily. DJ Moore's not playing where he has in the past. Maybe Williams is part of that reason. Maybe Moore's just also regressing at kind of an early, part in his career relative to what you might have expected. Williams has a pretty even distribution, I would say, of good and bad. So, as you could probably imagine, he is going to then go in the, you know, neutral tier. I do think he's a little bit better than Daniels, as insane as that may seem, strictly because I do think Caleb is doing higher level things, albeit Daniels is definitely doing it at a more consistent level. And, this is also to say, too, Daniels had a much miles and miles better rookie year than Williams. So it's not to say that it's going to continue. I'm just strictly saying to this point, I think Caleb has, had lots of duds, but he's also, been pretty darn exciting. So for that reason, I have him above Daniels in this middling tier. And back to McCorkle, we have a very interesting thing here in that Jones leads the league in yards per game. And, you know, props to you if you expected that one. The Niners do seem to cycle between quarterbacks seemingly every 2 or so years, despite being really good lots of the time. So, I guess that was in play. Maybe Kyle Shanahan wanted Mac Jones over Trey Lance to begin with, and now he's had both at his disposal, and really is trying to prove people wrong by showing that they should have gone with Jones. In the first place, they should have listened to him. So maybe that's part of this, but you know, in all seriousness, Mac Jones is playing really well right now. He is not being supported well for the players on the field with him, the bigger part of things. All due respect to Kyle Shanahan, who's been amazing with dialing up plays, but Jones just seemingly an injury or two away from you or me being called in to be his new receiver. It is kind of at that level seemingly with the Niners being so insanely hurt once again, but Jennings, Pearsall, um, Ayuk, all missing time. That is, Kittle, of course, too. Forgot about him. It is not ideal, to say the least. And Jones is still, like I said, yards aren't everything, but it is a sign that, he is really playing at a consistently good level. It might be slightly inflated. He might not, in all actuality, be the highest in combined yards because this is looking at starts, and he might have not, technically gotten a registered start for filling in for Purdy. I would imagine not. I think it just is as simple as, um, did you start the game or not? It's actually not starts, is what it is. It's based on wins and losses, I should say. So there was a little bit more ambiguity than something as simple as starts. But either way, I think the number is probably a bit inflated because I do think he gets the benefit of filling in for Purdy while not always being registered for that. So I don't know that entirely. Maybe he just is straight up leading in yards. So either way, Jones is playing well with, regard to that not being true. Good QBR, good EPA despite not having great support, not getting a whole lot of play action help, not turning the ball over. And, the only thing is he's not making splashy plays, but darn it, he's consistently making the right play. And that's got to count for something. So if he continues playing at this level, Super Bowl potential on the right team. The Niners are not the right team right now, Probably won't be this entire year, to be honest, but playing super well. And I do got to give him his props for that. Didn't see that one coming. Also, didn't see Matt Stafford turning back time. He was, I think, super overrated by lots of people coming into the year who thought, you know, he was like top 10 because he was really good like 2 years ago. That just didn't resonate with me because he's been sandwiching good and bad years together for a bit now. So to just be like, yeah, definitely pencil him in his top 10 was, I think really bad discourse. But, those people have been kind of proven right, at least to this point, with Stafford, who's number one in PFF grade, tied for number one at least in the whole number sense. I am not lame, so I just quickly do all my stuff. I don't worry about decimal points. Those are, for squares. So it could be wrong. Stafford could be, even like a whole point lower than Dak and somebody who hasn't been mentioned yet. So I'm not going to get into that. But, Stafford has a 91 PFF grade, and two other people do as well. So at the end of the day, that's good enough for me. Stafford has looked the part too. I haven't watched enough Rams as I want to because I think they are just such an exquisite team. And both sides of the ball, they have a lot to look at and be excited for. And, honestly, Stafford is a big contributing part in that because the receiver play is awesome. Don't get me wrong. But Stafford is really making a lot of it as well. That PFF grade checks out from what I've seen. Also, the big time throw percentage checks out as well. Top 20th percentile with a 7.2%. That is super high. The number one is 7.4, so he's right there. Not putting the ball in harm's way either, which is, usually not the case. It's usually, if you're high in big time throw, you're also high in turnover worthy. Not for Stafford. He is just so good right now. Top 20th percentile in combined yards. There's just a lot going for him right now. Again, I will say the support is good. Aside from the offensive line being ridiculously awful somehow, bit unexpected. I guess Havenstein and I think Avila, something like that, is hurt at points as well. So I guess there is that. That does make sense, but not to the level that they've been bad. Because they were like bottom three, I think, in PFF pass protection, which is really bad. So, Stafford, awesome stuff. And if he was even on an average team, honestly, he could have them in the mix for something really good. I think, you know, these other guys have just played at a little bit of a higher level to this point, but, you know, definitely would hear out arguments for Stafford over a good chunk of those guys. Now we have the the I don't even know. I wanted to do something funny there for Kyler, but I couldn't. And you know what? Maybe he doesn't deserve it because he's not playing well right now. And, you know, he's just playing kind of boring football as well. So if you're going to be boring, you got to, you know, be checking the boxes consistently at least. And I wouldn't say he's doing that. I would say, he's making the right play a good amount, but not enough to negate the fact that he's not really doing anything splashy. The connection between him and Marvin Harrison Jr. is just not where it needs to be. Let's say that. So, Kyler has some stuff going against him, but I also think just, on his own merit, he's not playing well right now. Basically, all he has going for him is that he's not putting the ball in harm's way. But I would hope that would be the case because he's also not really putting the ball up for grabs for anybody right now. He's just kind of, existing. He's bottom 40th percentile in yards, completion percentage over expected, QBR. no big time throws to speak of. He is not good right now. I would rather have him as a backup than a starter. So, for somebody that was given that reputation, rightfully so. I'm not saying it was like just random or anything, but for somebody that was given that reputation, he is just spitting in that direction and saying, "You got it all wrong. It was, everybody else's fault but my own, or, I've just really figured things out." Sam Darnold, if you've made it this far in the video, this is the part for you. This is your reward. Is the Glaze session of Sam Darnold through 5 weeks. My goodness, this guy makes Seattle management look like the absolute bee's knees. It looks like a return to grace where they, just were drafting every like fourth and fifth rounder Hall of Famer they could for a couple drafts with like Sherman, Chancellor, guys of that nature. It is insane how good Darnold is right now. He is first in PFF, first in completion percentage over expected, first in turnover worthy play percentage. That is all of the areas for the most part. And the stuff that he's not first in, he's usually really good at. The only thing is, he does get a lot of play action support, but that's kind of whatever. I'm not too caught up in that. He is just so good at so much of the game. The offense is humming in a relative sense. He's in the top 20 percentile for expected points added per dropback. Also, quarterback rating. He's in the top. Actually, hold on. I think I'm tripping there. I think he's actually. Yeah, no, he's even better than that. He's in the top 20 percentile for big time throw rate at 5.5%, but he's in even higher percentage than that. I should have listed exactly what percentiles it was, but I stopped listing when we got to the top 20 percentiles. But he's in the top like three, it looks like, in QBR and expected points added per dropback. Definitely showing my amazing note taking skills there by, not taking the right, precautions there. But either way, we don't need the exacts because darn it, Darnold is playing out of his mind. Not really getting a lot of help from the team, even. JSN, awesome. He's really figured out how to play that outside receiver position unexpectedly. Didn't really do it in college, didn't do it in the pros. All of a sudden, just, masterful there with Cup as well, being another slot guy. So, you know, this team has no business having this level of offense, seemingly, but we're left with Sam Darnold as quarterback number one. Gonna take me a second to get him there, but yeah, quarterback one so far. And we do immediately come crashing down to Michael Penix, who, you know, most play action percent in the league. That's the notable thing about him. Also, not good at pretty much any other thing. He has a very confusing amount of big plays going on right now where, it seemed like he was going to be a big game hunter entering the league, but he seems just totally neutered and that he's not really pushing it deep or getting, much out of plays. He's just kind of doing whatever and, not really putting the ball in harm's way a whole bunch, but just not functioning, not getting yards, not being efficient. It's not good right now what he's doing. He's better than Rodgers, but lots of people are. I'm not going to you know, be too concerned with that one. So we do rise up again though with another fun story in Baker Mayfield. Just absolutely outperforming expectations again. I'm making the zoom bigger once again. because it's hard moving these guys around now that we have lots of these rows filled out. But anyways, Mayfield, he is a lot of fun right now. He is, I think, what people were hoping Jameis Winston would be, where it's a lot of big throws. There's a lot of turnover worthy ones in there too. But darn it, he doesn't have Bucky Irvin with the run game. He doesn't have Mike Evans. He hasn't had Chris Godwin. You know, Igbuka is playing really well. He does have that going for him. The line hasn't been what it was or we hoped for, maybe. And he's just out there balling. And, the team, I think, is pretty sturdily overachieving to this point. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that 4-1 record. They've basically won every game with some last minute shenanigans. But, at the end of the day, Mayfield's also putting them in that position to win those things. He's not really putting them in a position to be, losing in the first place because he's playing well pretty much entirely through. But, even with the rest of the team not being particularly good, he's giving his team a chance every single game because he is just, if he's got any angle to throw something to fit it in a tight window, he's saying that's all I need. And, I'm going to squeeze it in. No problem. So there will be times where you're like, Baker, that was not there at all. But there's also going to be times where it's like, Baker, that didn't seem like that was there at all. So I'm going to put him in right below Allen. You could argue Mayfield to this point has been better than Allen when you factor in the support. Again, it's weird saying support with Allen because the main thing with Allen is he doesn't have, the support that some amazing quarterbacks have had in recent years. But Mayfield honestly has way worse than that for the most part to this point. So Mayfield not getting any support play action wise. He does get a lot of run after catch, but he's doing a lot of this on his own, getting a lot of yards, getting a lot of, throws in that people wouldn't have expected from him or basically anybody else. Good stuff from Mayfield. And once again, we return to earth with Bryce Young, unfortunately, who, man, these number one overall picks haven't been doing too hot, as he's also going to go in the ultimate nullifier department. I think I'm going to put him behind Russ. I say I think as if I'm not just basing it off of what my data suggests, but Young is, he's really putting up some impressive throws, and he's not getting any benefit from play action. Those are the two things that are notable for him, but everything else I have listed for him is not good. We're talking bottom 20th percentile in QBR, expected points added, drop back, completion percentage over expected, total yards. He's turning the ball over, at least putting it in harm's way a lot at the 40th percentile mark. So lots of things that are not good, and, not a good supporting cast by any stretch of the imagination. They've basically said, hey, Ted McMillan, you're a rookie, but you're going to be our number one, number two, and also number three receiver. And, Young, your line's going to be okay. That's about it. Another coach in over his head. Canales is not NFL ready, at least as a head coach, but, Young has to be better as well. And to wrap it up, we have nothing really of note, to be honest, in Spencer Rattler. The only thing I know about him was that he was a bit of a not so good teammate, and I think it was high school. I saw clips of him being like a bit of a bully with his team, but, not holding on too much to that. I'm more so looking at his numbers, and his numbers aren't good. So, lots of turnover worthy plays. He is not getting help with run after the catch, which is annoying since, Olave, you would think would be contributing. Shaheed could get some stuff in, but, just overall not getting much of anything. The results are about exactly what you'd expect from an EPA perspective. He is doing some things well. He has a solid PFF grade, solid QBR, and solid completion percentage over expected. So he does have that going for him, but overall, not doing anything too meaningful, not really combining for a lot of yards or splash plays to negate the turnover worthy ones. So we're going to put Rattler as the best of the backups, which is, kind of fair. He is a backup after all, in, you know, most senses of it, where Shuck is supposed to be the guy they give more run to, but, you know, hasn't been the case, even though Shuck is about 37 years old as a rookie. So, yeah, Rattler's done a good enough job of, I guess, holding off the job, but nothing really impressive. Kind of a meh way to end the review, but if you've made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. Definitely a sizable video. I wasn't expecting it to be this long, but you know, been a bit inconsistent with going through things in videos, so I appreciate the patience and I appreciate you watching all of this. I hope the little bit of memery with Carson Wentz's Prince Harry and Russ's face being super zoomed in, that wasn't really intended, it just kind of happened. But, appreciate that. And be on the lookout for the team analysis that will be coming out in short order. And be sure to take care of your mental health. Thank you again for watching.